Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. Tonight's guest is somebody that hosts the Wildcard Champs podcast to talk about our beloved Yankees, go around the majors, and some Raptors basketball and Leafs hockey talk. Sean Verma, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. All right, did you watch the home run derby last night?
Yeah, I did. I was surprised at how it went. I predicted Peter Alonso to win it, but the way it happened, that's going to be in the record books. 90 home runs for Vlad Guerrero Jr. Very impressive.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. too. I'm sure you've seen him play in person because you're out in Toronto. And have you seen Vlad Jr. yet?
Okay, I'm going to give like a 30-second spiel. So me and my buddy Andrew, my co-host on the podcast, went to see the Yankees when they were in Toronto about a month ago, and they lost the game 4-3. Tanaka, it was the Angel Hernandez game, and Vlad, I think, got an RBI single in that game. He's legit, man. He's legit.
He is legit. I remember that Angel Hernandez game. That was back in June when we lost 2 out of 3 out in Toronto. But yeah, Angel Hernandez is the worst, and yeah, I don't like talking about Angel Hernandez. He really is a scapegoat in a lot of Yankee losses throughout the years, in my opinion. So tonight's the All-Star game. Who do you think wins, the American League or the National League? Just a fun little prediction.
I'm just going to take a wild guess. I think it's going to be the AL because it pretty much always is.
It pretty much always is. 6 in a row. I'm going to take the National League. I think they're due. And I'm going to make a bonus prediction that Cody Bellinger will be the MVP of the All-Star game. He's having a great year. He did not participate last night in the Home Run Derby, but I think that it's his turn to shine. And I just think that he's going to have maybe a multi-home run game tonight against the American League. So what's your take on that?
What year he's having, Because last year, we all know he had a great rookie year in 2017, but last year, something was off with him. It didn't really seem to shine until the Dodgers' playoff run. But this year, he's a man on a mission.
Man on a mission this year, absolutely. I think this is his year. It's his award to lose unless he gets hurt. All due respect to Christian Yelich, who's been phenomenal on the Brewers this year. But to me, baseball has kind of gone in an NBA route of best player on the best team in terms of the MVP, with the exception of Yelich last year, because Mookie Betts won it last year. The Red Sox were the best team. The year before it was Altuve, although the Astros were the 2 seed. The only reason why they weren't the 1 seed a few years ago is because Cleveland won 21 straight games. I don't know if you remember that. Remember the Indians won
It was 22, actually, and yeah, I do remember that. I thought the Indians were the team to beat. When the Yankees beat them, I was speechless.
Oh, me too. I thought the Indians were the team to beat that year, too, because of that run they went on. Then the Yankees pulled off that improbable comeback against them, and I was very surprised about it. I actually picked the Indians to win that series in 5, but the Yankees ended up winning in 5. I thought the Yankees would take it to 5 only because I thought that they'd potentially win those 2 games at home with the crowd behind them, because that was their first time in the LDS in like 5 years at that time. And I thought that Aaron Judge was going to be a monster in that series, in which
he was a non-factor.
He was a non-factor, actually, in that series. He was better in the Astros series. He had a couple homers in that series. I think he did have a homer against the Indians, though, if I'm not mistaken.
He hit a double off Trevor Bauer that scored a couple runs. It was a big hit at the time, don't get me wrong. But outside of that, some bad calls by the umpires, but for the most part, he was striking out almost every at-bat.
Yeah, I remember he did have a homer against the Indians. I think it was off of, I want to say Carrasco, but I don't think it was Bauer. It certainly wasn't Kluber. Didi owned Kluber in Game 5. And then the Astros series, I remember Judge hit a couple homers in that series, too. And then, obviously, last year, he had 2 against the Red Sox.
I'm not going to go too long on a spiel about this, but that series victory against the Indians, in my personal opinion, that was the most satisfying series win that I've ever seen outside of anything that happened in the 2009 playoffs. Because up until that point, the Yankees were the team that were regular season stat patters. In the 2000s, they always made the playoffs and then would lose to an inferior opponent.
Yep.
This time, however, they were the inferior opponent, and they were the one that showed up the number 1 seed Cleveland Indians. It was satisfying, to say the least.
Oh, it was absolutely satisfying. I was very impressed with that series win. I think that's going to go down as one of the better series wins over the last 10 years or so for the Yanks. And speaking of the Yankees, who is your favorite pitcher in terms of trade targets?
I mean, you've been on my Twitter feed, right? My guy
Oh,
right
yeah.
now is Trevor Bauer.
I like Trevor Bauer too. His stats have improved since a little bit of a slide there. But I still think that Bumgarner on the right team, and if he's motivated, and with that postseason resume, I really can't ignore Bumgarner though. But if Bumgarner's not right, then my second option, of course, would be Trevor Bauer. Although I really do love Bumgarner's postseason resume, and my big fear is that say the Astros get him, and say the Yankees get Bauer, and say the Astros beat us in the playoffs again, and say it's Bumgarner in that Verlander spot from a couple years ago that absolutely thrives. That's my big fear. If he goes to another team, not the Yankees, and absolutely thrives, just like Verlander did in 17. But you never know. I could be wrong about this.
Am I crazy for thinking the Astros are just simply better at dealing with pitchers than the Yankees are?
Oh, absolutely. You're right about that. I think you are right. If Garrett Cole was a Yankee, I don't know if he would have been as good as he was with the Astros. I'm not convinced about that.
I don't think he's Sonny Gray bad, though. Like, I think there's a happy medium to be had there.
Yeah, not Sonny Gray bad, but who knows? Maybe he would have been a little better than Paxton here. But I really don't know. There's something about the Yankees and pitchers they acquired that end up not turning out for the best. But meanwhile, for the Astros, they really everything that they seem to touch turns to gold. I mean, other than Ken Giles.
Yeah, the Blue Jays. He gets traded to the Jays for Osuna, and he becomes one of the best closers in baseball. Who would have thought?
Yeah, I was very surprised that Giles actually turned out to be a good guy for Toronto, and I think Toronto's going to end up dealing him. I certainly want no part of him. I think that he could potentially go back to Houston, but I don't think Houston would go there either. I think a good spot for him would be the Red Sox, personally. What do you think about that fit?
I don't want the Red Sox to improve their team at all. I want the team that they currently have to remain on the field, because my biggest fear is that they make the division race interesting again.
I think that the division race is going to end up being a little bit more interesting than people think. I have a bold prediction segment coming up in a little bit that we're going to do, and I think that they at least could be a little bit more interesting than given credit for. I still think the Yankees will win it, but I think it's going to be interesting because I think that both them and the Rays have a chance to improve their rosters. But I hope you're right about Boston. But I think Boston's under some pressure to make a move at the deadline, even though they just won it last year. Who do you not want to see in a Yankees uniform come July 31st? I have an answer.
Okay, so there isn't really a pitcher out there that I don't want to see in pinstripes, for the simple reason that we need anybody. We need just about anyone to get. But if I had to give an answer, I gotta say Zach Wheeler. I'm just not convinced that he's such a stuff guy, and the Yankees have had very poor history with stuff guys, especially with the Larry Rothschild just not getting the most out of pitching talent. The thing with Bauer, the reason why I prefer him, even though you could call him a stuff guy, the thing I like about Bauer is he leads the American League in innings pitched. And the Yankees bullpen, they need relief from the starters. So you put Bauer in the rotation and he's throwing 7 innings. How do you expect to get any of that out of Zach Wheeler?
That's very true.
And Zach Wheeler is also a National League pitcher. Let's not forget. How many times have National League pitchers come to the AL East and been successful? You can't name that many.
Nope.
I mean, like Kevin Brown, Randy Johnson. Remember that?
Yeah. You're not wrong about that.
Carl Pavano, it doesn't seem to work out.
You're right, it doesn't seem to work out. And that can be said not just with the Yankees, but even with Boston. I've seen guys get traded to Boston and flame out too.
Josh Beckett actually was a National League pitcher that when he got traded to the Red Sox, he was pretty good for a couple
Other than Josh Beckett, you're right. That's a good one. He was great for the Red Sox when he was in his prime.
And I only remember him because he is my most hated Red Sox member. Like, number one for me.
I don't even know who my most hated Red Sox ever is. I was actually at David Ortiz's final game at Yankee Stadium, and I gave him a standing ovation because I knew that was going to be the last time I'd see him in a Red Sox uniform. And
you know what?
He was like the biggest Yankee killer ever.
That's classy for sure. If I was there, I would have given Ortiz a standing ovation because as much as he killed the Yankees for the longest time, he's a classy guy, and there's not very much for me to hate about him. A lot of Red Sox players have specific mannerisms that can easily be picked apart. There's nothing you can really do about Ortiz. He was their Derek Jeter for the longest time.
Yep. Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for Big Papi. My pitcher that I really don't want the Yankees to acquire is somebody that's had a surprisingly decent year this year, and that's Mike Minor of Texas.
That's a good one.
I'm not sure that Texas is going to be a seller or a buyer. To me, I think that they could potentially do both. On a podcast in a couple days from now, I'm going to do a list of buyers and sellers in both. And I have the Rangers listed as a potentially for both, just like the Indians. I think the Diamondbacks could do both as well, but I don't want Mike Minor. To me, he's somebody that is having a career year, and I just don't want the Yankees to touch him at all. And I just don't see him as an answer, really, for any of these contenders in the American League in terms of top 3 guy in their rotation.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a good answer. He probably would have been my second behind Wheeler in terms of pitchers that I'm not totally interested in. Like you said, it seems like he's sort of come out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm not a Mike Minor fan. I would rather have Zach Wheeler than Mike Minor because Wheeler at least can get to like 100 pitches. And I think that Minor is somebody that I'm just not a fan of at all. I just don't love the idea of him in the AL East. I don't love Wheeler in the AL East either, but if you forced me to pick one to have, it would be Wheeler. Because I just think Wheeler has better stuff, but we just talked about how stuff can be overrated sometimes. Who do you have as...
It's the pitching coach that's working with them that can play a big factor.
Yeah, exactly, that too. Who do you have as a surprise guy for the Yanks in the second half? I have a guy in mind, but I'm not really sure how you would react to it if I told you who mine was. Who do you have as like a surprise guy in the second half? Like, the surprise guy of the first half was Gio Urshela or Domingo Germán. I would say more Urshela because Germán was on the IL for a while, but to me Urshela is a huge surprise in the first half. Who do you see as like the second half's Gio Urshela?
Does this have to be a player that is not really that good but has a good half?
Yeah, it could be.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. Like Gio Urshela, a player that we didn't expect anything from that surprised us.
Okay, this is going to sound like a cop-out, but this is the only one I can think of off the top of my head. I think it's going to be Giancarlo Stanton. And before you laugh at me for saying this, he's been injured for most of the season. And, I've kind of written him off in the past for saying he's not going to do anything this year. But, there's a real possibility that he could come back and absolutely rake and shut me up. Because stuff like that's happened before. I'll never forget when A-Rod came back from his suspension in 2015 and hit 30 homers. I just was like, what?
I was at a lot of games in 2015 in that season, and I enjoyed A-Rod's resurgence. And that, let's be honest, that helped them get to the playoffs in 2015. Even though they lost in the wild card to Dallas Keuchel in Houston, A-Rod really helped them that year. So I really respect that out of Alex, and obviously Mark Teixeira is a big part of that as well. My surprise guy of the second half is somebody who Twitter absolutely hated in the first half and showed some signs in the Tampa series, and that's Mike Tauchman. He was the guy that I had as my surprise guy for the season, but I've been sort of wrong so far, so I'm going to say him for the second half. He's shown some signs of life against Tampa Bay, and I won't be surprised if he gets to like 15 home runs. I could just see that happening.
So, funny thing about Tauchman. So, in my podcast, Andrew and myself, we have a segment called Play 'em, Bench 'em, Cut 'em. And every time we get to the Cut 'em section, Andrew always lists Mike Tauchman. He can't stand the guy for like no reason, other than for the fact that he doesn't really have a name behind him. He doesn't really put up impressive numbers. He's kind of he's like Brian Cashman's next attempt at a Luke Voigt, right? But it hasn't really materialized.
Yeah, that's what I I don't think he's going to be as impactful as Luke was in the second half of last year, but I could picture Talkman having between 10 and 15 home runs in the second half of the season. I'd qualify that as a surprise. How about a flop player for the second half of the season? Mine is so obvious. Who's yours?
Oof. I'm going to say, I don't think people are going to like this. I think it might be DJ LeMahieu.
That wouldn't surprise me.
We might see him. Well, it looks like he's running away with the batting title right now. He's never really hit this good before. Outside of one season where he had a batting title, I think he might regress in the second half, and it could be drastic. We could see his batting average is, 336 right now?
Yeah.
I would be totally surprised if by the end of the season it's like 290.
That wouldn't dumbfind me. I wasn't going to pick DJ LeMahieu. I think that he's going to regress a little bit, but not that drastic. I'm going to say that he ends up like around 320 on the season, which would still be great, in my opinion.
If he does, great.
Yeah, I still think that's great, but I think that he regresses just a little bit, and maybe his power goes down a little bit too. My flop player the second half is Brett Gardner, because he always tends to be a second half flop every single year. So I'm going to continue the trend and say that Brett Gardner is the flop of the second half. 15 homers in the first half. Colored me surprised. I think that Gardner, I'd be surprised if he got to 30 homers. So I'm going to say that Gardy's the second half flop of the season, the second half flop on the Yankees, to the point where potentially they call somebody up in the second half, or they make a trade before the deadline to possibly replace him, depending on how Giancarlo Stanton's rehab goes and whatnot. So I'm going to say that Brett Gardner is the second half disappointment.
Honestly, I'm tempted to change my answer to that. The reason why I didn't use Gardner, off the bat, was because, one, I was trying to think a little bit out of the box, and two, this is something that I think every Yankee fan should be expecting, right? That Gardner's going to hit poorly in the second half, because he does it every year.
Exactly. Maybe except for 1 year. I remember 1 year he actually had a great second half. I forget what year that was. I think it was 2014 when he went on that monster run. Remember against Texas, he hit like a bunch of home runs, and everyone's like, "Where's this coming from?"
Yeah, okay, that's a fair point, but from what I've watched in recent years, the most noteworthy example of second half regression was 2015. He was an all-star in the first half, 301 average, and by the second half of the season, by the end of the season, his average was in the low 250s.
I remember that. He did regress in the second half of 15.
50-point regression.
Yeah, he had a big regression in the second half of 2015. 2017, I think he avoided that. Am I wrong, or did he have a second half regression in 17? That was the year of the ALCS.
But it wasn't as drastic as 15. So, yeah, 17, he was okay in the second half. He had a 14-game hitting streak in July. So, he had a hot July and then a cold August and whatever September was. I don't even really remember. I remember Gardy most that season for the home run against the Cubs. That was so clutch. It's not even funny.
Oh, my God. That was one of my favorite moments of that year.
And the at-bat he had against Cody Allen in the Cleveland series. That's pretty noteworthy also.
Oh, in Game 5. Yeah, they got an insurance run there in the top of the ninth inning. I remember I was out watching that game, and I was going absolutely nuts when Gardner got that hit. My other moment from the Cleveland series that was my favorite was obviously Greg Bird's homer off of Andrew Miller in Game 3, which really won them that game against the Indians, the 1-0 game. And I remember I was out and I ran around the bar because I was so excited. My friends were like, "If the Yankees score a run, go run around the bar." I'm like, "Okay." And then I went and ran around the bar because Greg Bird homered. And I was like, "Yeah!"
Side note, what are your thoughts on Greg Bird?
Oh, on Twitter the other day I did a thread of second half predictions, and one of them was that the Yankees part ways with Greg Bird, because I think that Mike Ford could be a surprise player for them in the second half before Voit comes back. But they're saying that Voit might be back for this Toronto series, but I'm not buying that. So I'm going to say that Ford surprises and Voigt's back, and then maybe they make a deadline ad at first base as like a bench guy, like a better version of Kendrys Morales, and that's how Bird is DFA'd potentially, or used as a trade asset to get somebody. You never know.
I mean, I'd love for Greg Bird to be able to be used as a trade asset because I do think the talent is there and he could flourish with another team. But his stock is simply too low right now, and I don't think it's going to get us that much. Really, when I talk about low stock, I'm really referring to the fact that the guy can't stay on the field.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who would have thought that the Yankees got something for Chase and Shreve last year? And
Okay, fair enough. That's a very good point you just made. But Brian Cashman, if he's going to get a valuable piece out of Greg Bird, it's probably not going to be It's probably not going to be a pitcher. It's probably going to be one of those position players. It's going to be like Luke Voigt, a player that, his analytics department is looking at. It's probably a minor league player that hasn't had an option to have any major league playing time, and they see, his raw numbers, maybe his walk rate or pitches per plate appearance or something, and they look at that and say, well, we could make him something, and that's pretty much what happened with Luke Voigt.
Yeah, that is what happened with Voigt. I remember Voigt got called up the first time and he stunk. And then they sent him down. Then they brought him back up for a series against the Orioles in Camden Yards in which we swept Baltimore. And that's when he had his breakthrough. I believe he had a 2-homer game in Baltimore, and it took off from there and was awesome in September. I was at the wild card game last year when he had that triple, and that was awesome.
I would love to go to a game at Yankee Stadium one of these years.
I heard you talk about the new Yankee Stadium with your podcast partner Andrew, and I think it was your first podcast, the one where I had the mailbox question, and you guys were talking about the old stadium versus the new stadium, and the new stadium I think is better than given credit for. I mean, I'm biased obviously, and I go there often. I'm actually going to the game against the Tampa Bay Rays on the 15th, so 6 days from now I'll be in the Bronx at that game, and hopefully Luke Voigt's back by then. We'll see. So, yeah, I like the new stadium, and I've never actually been to the old stadium. My mom obviously has, and she really liked it. And the old stadium, from what I heard, it used to, shake when there was, a big moment.
Yeah, it was a rickety stadium from what I understood. But, yeah, I mean, when they tore it down, I had to be, 9 years old, and so it's not like I've ever been there either. It's just, a lot of the games I watched in my childhood, I saw the old Yankee Stadium, and, it was one of those things, when people call it the Cathedral of Baseball, it literally looks like one. It kind of looks like a castle on the inside.
Yeah.
That's why I've always just loved the aesthetics of it, even though it looks so imperfect.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. Let's talk about the league in general. And how about the second half MVP? Sometimes we see guys that didn't really necessarily have quote-unquote great first halves, but have great second halves. A la Chase Headley in 2012 is a great example of this. It was the National League MVP of the second half of 2012. That's my favorite example. But so who's your second half American League MVP? That doesn't necessarily have to be the winner of the award at the end of the year, but this just for the second half. I know who mine is.
I have Mookie Betts. I just don't think he's going to be as mediocre as he's been in the first half. I don't think he's going to keep that up.
That is a great call. I do think he's going to have a big second half, and one of the reasons why I think the Red Sox are going to hang around the division race. Mine's my favorite player in the league. It's a Yankee, and it's Aaron Judge. I think that the fact that he's not participating in the All-Star game is a good thing for him, so he can just rest up before the home stretch, and I really expect him to be great. We talked about the possibility of DJ LeMahieu regressing. I think that they're going to be talking about Aaron Judge as the second half MVP of the Yankees, and if he didn't get hurt, I think people would be saying, oh, he'd be the MVP of the AL if he didn't get hurt. I think he could have 30 homers in the second half of the season. So I'm going to go with Aaron Judge, although it would not surprise me if Mookie Betts goes on an absolute tear in the second half. And don't rule out JD Martinez either. I feel like he hasn't had that great of a first half either. I won't be surprised if he goes nuts in the second half as well. What about the National League? Second half MVP.
I'm going to probably go with Javier Baez. And I know he's been good in the first half, but I kind of need him to be better in the second half for my fantasy team. So I'm going to jump on the Baez bandwagon.
Not a bad choice. I think he's had a good first half. I think he's been the best Cub of the first half, although Chris Bryant's having a bounce back year. And Chris Bryant was my National League MVP preseason pick. So I'd like to see Chris Bryant have a good second half. But I'm going to go with Nolan Arenado of the Rockies, who, like Baez, has had a very good first half. But I think that the Rockies are a team that struggled before the All-Star break, but I think they're going to get on a little bit of a run here, just like they did last year, and it's going to be led by the best third baseman in the game, Nolan Arenado. So I think that Arenado will be your second half National League MVP. How about second half American League Cy Young?
That's a good one. I'm going to go with another Red Sox member. I'm going to go with Chris Sale. His underlying numbers show that he's been quite unlucky in the first half, and I know, people say he's a terrible second half pitcher. Wouldn't it be funny if he had a reverse split this year? Wouldn't it be funny if he was not so great in the first half, at least result-wise, and in the second half he figures it out?
I agree with you. Chris Sale is also my choice. I had him written down for the same reasons as you. Bad first half in terms of expectations-wise. I really wasn't thinking that he was going to have an ERA at the ERA it's at right now. And I expect him to be better. And you're right, he's been very unlucky in a lot of these games. I remember he was awful against the Mariners on opening night. He sucked against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. I believe it was in April. I'm not 100% sure. But I do think that Chris Sale will be back to the Chris Sale of old in the second half, and he's going to have a reverse of fortunes there to help the Red Sox go on a potential second half run. What about National League second half Cy Young?
I have Chris Paddock.
Oh, interesting call there. You think he cuts back called up? Because don't forget they sent him down.
Yeah, I do. Well, what do the Padres have to lose at this point?
Very true. I have somebody that got off to a bit of a slow start by his standards, but has been absolutely red hot since June, and that's Max Scherzer. He is the reason why the Nationals are back in the playoff mix in the National League, and I think he keeps this up. So I'm going to say Max Scherzer, with an honorable mention to Jacob deGrom, who got off to a slow start this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he looks like the deGrom that won the Cy Young a year ago, despite the Mets' issues.
Yeah, I think that, so to respond to your takes, I think Scherzer's been pitching so well in the last month of the year, like historically good. I think that in the second half he'll still be good, but I don't think he's going to be, 0.84 ERA good. And as for deGrom, I do think he's going to be better than he will be in the first half, but I think that Chris Paddock will be just unbelievable. That's sort of why I think I'm putting them ahead of the other two. And I've been wrong before. I've had some extraordinarily stupid takes that go absolutely haywire. I'm never going to forget when I predicted a couple of years ago when I predicted Michael Pineda to win the Cy Young. I'll never forget that. That was an absolute stinker.
A lot of people thought that Michael Pineda was the future ace of the New York Yankees, and I think I might have been one of those people. I don't think I had him winning the Cy Young, but I thought he'd be a Cy Young candidate on the Yankees. I was way wrong. That was back in 2015.
Yeah.
I remember that. It's funny. He was mediocre that year, and that was the year that Nathan Eovaldi was on the Yankees and actually was getting a lot of run support and winning a lot of games. But their best pitcher that year was Tanaka.
Yeah, that 2015 rotation it wasn't bad, but it wasn't really that impressive. Like, you watch the games and you're thinking, okay, I mean, if our offense scores 6 runs, we'll probably win the game because you have Betances and Miller at the back end, but it's going to get close in those final few innings.
Yeah, and then the bullpen this year is much better than the bullpens of the past. And I remember Justin Wilson was on the team that year, too. He had a good second half, and then Shreve obviously had the good first half, and he was terrible, and then Justin Wilson emerged as the 7th inning guy for them, and then Cashman goes and ships him away for Chad Green and Luis Sessa, which I'm going to say it's fair that the Yankees may have gotten the better end of the deal because obviously Justin Wilson's now in the Mets and they're struggling bullpen, and Chad Green has been a valuable member of this Yankees team despite his slow start to the season.
Green's been pretty good since he came back from the demotion. He's been pretty good.
He has been pretty good. I won't be surprised if Holder is actually not amazing like Chad Green has been after the demotion, but I won't be surprised if Holder pitches to like a 3 ERA if he comes back.
One of the things that I need to pay attention with Jonathan Holder when he comes back, if at all, is the strikeouts. Because remember the Houston blown save where he gave up the home run to Yordan Alvarez a few weeks ago?
Yep.
Take a guess how many whiffs he got in that outing. How many swings and misses? Not strikeouts, just swings and misses.
I actually was out of town that night, but I was following it on my phone. How many did he get? Like 11? 10?
Just take a wild guess. Like a really wild guess.
A really wild guess. Like 12.
1.
Oh my god! He must have been throwing pitches out of the zone.
No, he was throwing batting practice.
Oh, yeah, he was probably throwing batting practice, you're right, because you said that Alvarez hit the home run, but the Yankees ended up winning that game anyway. That was a game that Stanton came up with a couple big hits, and if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he gave me that 2005 A-Rod vibe.
Yeah, the 05 A-Rod vibe. That's a good comparison to Stanton. Here's a good one for you in terms of baseball in general. The most surprising player traded. I have a hard time figuring out this one. Would it surprise you if Jose Abreu got traded? Because that's the name that's in my head. He's been in trade rumors before, but I think it would surprise some people if he was traded.
Jose Abreu's numbers are not great by his standards this year. And so it's kind of peculiar to me that people are throwing his name around because his trade value is not as high as it would have been in prior years. And the White Sox, they're a team that's supposed to be on the rise. I mean, they have one of the better farm systems in baseball. They had Eloy Jimenez as their number one guy in their system, and he hit a bunch of home runs against the Yankees this year when they played them. You got to think that at this point that they're satisfied with the talent pool they have. I mean, what more do you think they could possibly get? Like, what are they missing in terms of talent in their minor league system? I think they're missing pitching. I mean, Giolito has been nothing short of amazing for them.
Giolito's been the most improved pitcher in the game this year, and it's not even close.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think there is value to be had by Abreu, and they could get something for him. I'm not sure what. There's going to be a massive arms race. That's what the trade deadline is. The Yankees aren't the only team that needs starters. I think really
Houston.
The teams that are giving away starters are the teams that I think are going to get the most back in terms of a package. So, if Trevor Bauer gets traded, which is not a foregone conclusion, but if the rumors are swirling around, I'm hoping it happens. Trevor Bauer might be the one that gets the biggest haul. The Mets could get something for Wheeler. It wouldn't shock me if the Giants are actually able to get something for Bumgarner. Wouldn't shock me at all. But Abreu, I don't know. How many teams in the league are contending right now that desperately need further first base production? You could say the Red Sox because Mitch Moreland has had injuries and Steve Pearce, predictably so, is not the fluke player that he was last year. Yeah,
the Red Sox, everyone throws the Astros out there in terms of help at first base, but they called up Yordan Alvarez. He should be their first baseman going forward. So they don't need a first baseman. Although they were in play for Edwin Encarnacion.
Sorry, go ahead.
Houston was in play for Edwin Encarnacion.
Yeah.
But they already have Yordan Alvarez who could be the first base DH role in Houston. So maybe Abreu's a bad choice. Maybe I said him because the White Sox aren't really that good, although they're improving, don't get me wrong, but they're just a team to me that's not going to be in contention this year. Another interesting one, Whit Merrifield. Would that surprise you if the Royals moved on from him?
Wouldn't be surprising at all. But like Abreu, I'd be surprised if they got a huge haul for him.
I think that Whit Merrifield has been one of the quiet players in the game in terms of
He's a good
production.
player. I agree with you there. I have a lot of respect for his game, actually.
Yeah, he's a player like LeMahieu in the sense that his power game's a little better. He's somebody that always gets on base. I think DJ LeMahieu's a better player than Merrifield, but I think Merrifield can help somebody. Like, the Red Sox would have been a logical fit, but they have Michael Chavis manning second base now. The case for them to get a second baseman is to move Michael Chavis the first, and they can go out and get somebody. That's an interesting case, but if I'm them, I keep Moreland at first and Chavis at second, because Moreland's somebody that's a streaky player and could get hot for them. He's a good role player.
It's funny that you're talking about the Red Sox and infielders, middle infielders, actually. Because remember, last year, they traded for Ian Kinsler.
That's right. And Chavis was suspended last year because of the PEDs down in the minors. He wasn't even there last year.
Well, we all know the 2004 Red Sox are one of the most roided teams ever, and I will always live by that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, who would you say is like a surprising player that could potentially be on the move if you had to pick a player that nobody's really talking about that could be traded? To me, I'm going to say it's Whit Merrifield, but I don't know where he ends up.
I think Justin Smoke. This is coming from a guy that watches the Blue Jays a lot. By living in Ontario, I do watch a lot of Blue Jay games, so Justin Smoke could be that guy. His on-base percentage, like, he's kind of like, you know what he's kind of like? He's kind of like an Aaron Hicks with far less speed, in the sense that he walks and he hits home runs.
That's not a bad comparison because both of those guys obviously looked like busts earlier in their careers, and now with new teams, they've improved their games. I think Hicks is a better player than Smoke, but Smoke, when he gets hot, he's somebody that can carry an offense.
Yeah, no question. And if you're talking about first basemen that can get a haul back, we were talking about Abreu earlier. I mean, I would put Smoke in that sort of same stratosphere. People forget he was an All-Star, 2 years ago?
He was an All-Star, I think it was 2 years ago, and I believe he was with the Blue Jays then, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's on the injured list right now. I mean, I'm not sure if we're going to see him after the break when the Blue Jays come to the Bronx, but if he's healthy, if he gets healthy, I wouldn't be shocked if the Jays find something. They're trying to sell off their whole team. They've been doing that for a few years now. Last year it was Donaldson and Osuna. The year before that, it was... The names are escaping me, but they
Hap last year.
Rid of a lot of their players. They lost Edwin Encarnacion in free agency, and obviously Jose Bautista.
Don't forget about Hap.
Tulowitzki. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not gonna. I was almost gonna skip over his name because, he was a Yankee for like 10 minutes.
Wait a minute, who was a Yankee for 10 minutes?
Nice one. I like that. Tulo.
Oh, Tulo, yeah, that's not a bad call there in terms of guys that the Blue Jays got rid of because I remember when Colorado traded him to Toronto, and at the time we thought that Toronto gave up a lot, but it turned out that Colorado didn't get that much out of that deal either, so that's probably a lose-lose trade on both sides.
I mean, did you actually think Jose Reyes was that good of a baseball player?
He was good back when he was on the Mets for his first stint with them. That's really it.
But that was in the 2006, 2007. We're talking about 2015 here. The Blue Jays led the league in run differential at the time of that trade, and he was costing them runs with his glove. So that was a trade that Alex Anthopoulos, the former Blue Jays GM, he made that trade with the intention of improving the team's defense because the offense was prolific.
Yeah. You're right. And Tulo, I remember the Blue Jays were like 7 back of us in the American League East, and then they pulled off the Edwin Encarnacion. He was on that team. He used to be a Yankees killer back when he was on Toronto. he pulled off the trade for Troy Tulowitzki, and then he turns around and surprises everybody and trades for David Price. And David Price was awesome down the stretch and led them to the division title, and then he walks in free agency and goes to Boston. Hey, here's a good one for you. How about a bold prediction of the second half of the season, just in general in baseball?
Okay, I think that the Mets make the wild card interesting.
The Mets make the wild card interesting in the National League.
I think that they finish no worse than 3 games back of the second wild card.
Wow. So the case for that is, even though
Their
they
starting pitching has got to get better than it is. I just can't fathom the idea. We were talking about the fact that DeGrom should be pitching better in the second half, but we're forgetting one name in their rotation that's just, in my opinion, he's just too good to suck, and that's Noah Syndergaard.
Yeah, Syndergaard too. It has to be DeGrom and Syndergaard both pitching like aces. Maybe they end up keeping Wheeler. But even if they do get rid of Wheeler, they have the depth that could start. Like Seth Lugo, they converted to the bullpen. To me, Lugo is better off as a starter. Lugo's good, like as a starter, and then Gesellman's somebody that can start for them. And Jason Vargas has been a huge surprise for them this year.
Yeah, for sure.
So
but
that's
also, as mediocre as their bullpen is, I almost want to give the Mets a pass because look league-wide. I mean, this has been a terrible year for bullpens. So I think that not only should their rotation get better, but like Robbie Cano, he still has the bat. He still has that in him. I don't know why he's struggling so much offensively. I mean, when he was in Seattle, the guy was raking. It looked like he was going to decline for a few years, but I can't see him hitting so poorly the rest of the season. And Todd Frazier, who knows? But I think that other teams, like the Phillies, for instance, the reason why I thought they were overrated when people had them winning the division was because in 2018, so last year, they were the worst defensive team in baseball, probably the worst defensive team in baseball history. You aware of Ultimate Zone Rating?
Yes.
They have the worst team Ultimate Zone Rating in history.
Yep.
At least in the history of baseball since the stat began being tracked.
Yeah, I had the Phillies penciled in for like 88 wins. They might actually go under that. My bold prediction for the second half of the season,
I always thought their lineup was overrated. It was very mid-2000s Yankees-esque. And I always thought that, I looked at the Phillies and Mets rosters, and I said, the Mets they have more of a potential to succeed than the Phillies do. Now, as someone who doesn't hate the Mets because I'm not a New Yorker, the way that they've been so mediocre this season, it feels like they've been underperforming because I say they have a better team than last year, whether people want to admit it or not.
They do have a better team.
I don't know if it's Mickey Callaway that's been the problem. I don't know if it's the coaching staff. I don't know if just the clubhouse chemistry is a disaster. I don't know. What it comes down to is, if I had to think of a prediction that is so out there, it has to be the Mets are going to go on a run.
That's very interesting. I'm going to avoid that prediction because it's the Mets, and I don't love Mickey Callaway. But that's a bold prediction. But there are cases for it. Like you said, they're starting pitching, and Robinson Cano bouncing back, and when Diaz bouncing back. Like, there's arguments to be made for it.
I forgot about Diaz. Diaz should not be as bad as he was in the first half.
Yes, there are some arguments for it, so I can tolerate that prediction. I've had a couple in mind, and the one that I'm going to say is that the Cleveland Indians make the AL Central race with the Twins very interesting. Like your prediction with the Mets, I'm going to say that Cleveland finishes less than 5 games back of the Twins. So I'm going to say it's a 3-game finish between the Twins and the Indians, and that the Twins end up winning the American League Central.
I think that's actually more realistic than a lot of fans realize, so I'm not sure if I'd qualify as a bold prediction. Because I think they've been on a roll as of late, and that's part of the reason why there's some people that are skeptical that are going to trade Bauer. I think that they still should, even though that they're trying to get back in it, because look at their outfield. I mean, that's a black hole in terms of production. And they have loads of pitching depth. If they trade Bauer to try and get an outfielder, they immediately improve a sector of their roster that's a weakness. But also they have the likes of Shane Bieber, and they're going to get Kluber back at some point. It's definitely within the realm of possibility that Carrasco comes back with the leukemia. I hope he gets better. And Danny Salazar, we've forgotten about him. The Indians have tons of pitching.
They have
So
Clevenger.
losing Bauer would not necessarily hurt them in that aspect. It can only help improve their depth in other areas of the roster.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like that Indians team. And like you said, if they trade Bauer, it's not that big of a blow. They have the depth. Shane Bieber, to me, could be the breakout pitcher of the second half of the season that could potentially make the AL Cy Young race interesting. I'm a big fan of Shane Bieber.
I forgot Clevenger also.
Clevenger's great, too. I was very surprised that Bieber sucked against the Yankees when they faced him a few months ago, back in June. I was very surprised he sucked in that game because he pitched well against us last year, and he's pitched well throughout this season, too. I had him as my breakout AL pitcher this year, and I think he's going to be better for them. And I'm just not sold on the Minnesota Twins. This is part of this prediction, too. I like Barrios, and I think Jake Odorizzi, somebody that could be a regression pitcher in the second half, because he's just someone that, to me, is just mediocre. And
remember when he almost no-hit the Yankees last year?
I was just going to mention that. He almost no-hit the Yankees last year, and I think somebody got a hit in the 8th inning. I think the guy that broke it up might have actually been Giancarlo Stanton, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it might have been Bird, actually. I don't. That game was so long ago.
That was a while ago.
For the longest time, I had to remove that from my head because that was probably one of the worst losses of that season, just in my opinion. In terms of frustration level, yeah, the Twins, they've certainly been one of those teams that I'm not totally sure that they're going to keep up their first half pace. The Indians getting back in it will have a lot to do with how well the Twins play, obviously.
Yes, I totally agree with you there. Before we go, thoughts on the Toronto Raptors championship and Kawhi's decision to depart?
So first of all, the trade was worth it. I'm going to start with that because as someone who has watched the Raptors since the days of Andrea Bargnani, going way back there, I've seen a lot of Raptor teams that either sucked or were good enough to make the playoffs but weren't good to do much beyond that. And after them getting clowned by Paul Pierce and then getting swept by LeBron over and over again, I was getting real tired of watching the Raptors because it felt like the same thing over and over again. The team wasn't getting any better. You don't see these days a lot of crazy, bold trades like the one that Masai Ujiri made to get Kawhi Leonard for DeMar DeRozan, DeMar being a Raptors fan favorite. It was a trade that at the time, might have hurt some fans, and others might have been skeptical as to whether Kawhi was even going to commit to Toronto for that season. Forget free agency. We're just going to talk about the season itself. Was he going to be healthy, and was he even going to perform or play or anything? And yeah, he missed, 20 games in the regular season, but that paid off because, one, the Raptors had an extremely high winning percentage in the games that Kawhi didn't play, but also, once the postseason started, they looked like a team that was actually championship caliber. And that's what they were going to be judged upon to begin with because Kawhi had the label of Finals MVP. It just seemed like the Raptors were on the way up, but there were moments in that regular season where I was unsure. After they took out the Orlando Magic in 5 games, we're not going to talk about Game 1. That was an anomaly.
Yeah.
That was the first time the Raptors had ever knocked out an opponent in fewer than 6 games. And I thought that was significant. And while the 76ers did take them to 7 games, and it took a miraculous buzzer beater, which as a sports fan has got to be probably a top 5, one of my greatest memories as a sports fan has to be Kawhi's buzzer beater.
Yep.
There was an element, it's not really the most tangible thing in the world, but there's an element of toughness and grit that I saw in the Raptors that I had not seen in prior teams, including the ones with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry as the duo. And then once they got past Milwaukee, I just said, well, now they're playing with house money. They've never made it to the finals before. Golden State is the favorites. I know they don't have Kevin Durant, but they're still the Golden State Warriors. They have made it to the finals without Durant before. They've won without Durant before. The Raptors are playing with house money, and you know what? If they lose, so what? It was that finals. There was no stress involved in watching the finals, which I never thought that I'd have a team that goes all the way to the last round, and I was not having stomach ulcers every game. I was able to sit back, relax, and just enjoy each finals game. And once it was 3-1, I was just like, okay, I don't want to get too cocky here, but I mean, they're really close here. And then when the game 5, I'm glad I didn't get tickets to that game because I almost did. I almost got tickets to that game.
That was the Kevin Durant game.
It sucked watching Durant get hurt, but I can't help but admit that when it happened, I was like, this is their chance. This is their chance to ice this series. And it took till the 6th game for them to do it, but you know what? They did it. And I know a lot of people are going to try and put an asterisk on this title because of the Golden State Warriors injuries. First of all, the Warriors have benefited from opponent injuries also. And their fans won't admit that. I'm not going to discredit the Warriors for winning championships against teams that had injuries.
Yep.
But as long as I do that, I should not have to discredit the Raptors for beating what is still a great Warriors team, even if they are without their 2 best players. They still have Curry. They still have Draymond Green, who's a very good defender. They still have Boogie Cousins, who literally signed to get a free ring. Now, how funny is it that didn't work out? They still had a good enough team that it went from it being totally tipped in the Warriors' favor to it just simply being evenly matched.
Yep. And
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. One quick thing before we go. Thoughts on the Maple Leafs offseason and the future of Mitch Marner.
Okay. Before I get to that, I'm just going to 10 seconds. Good luck to Kawhi. Thanks for giving us a championship. Hats off to you, man. Once you come back to Toronto, I'm probably going to go to the Raptors-Clippers game in his return to Scotiabank Arena, and I'll be sure to give him a standing ovation. As for the Leafs are in a precarious situation because, as you talked about, Mitch Marner is a restricted free agent right now.
Yep.
And offer sheet's been made. The Canadians, did they make an offer sheet to Sebastian Aho?
Sebastian Aho of Carolina. Yep.
Yeah. So I think it's inevitable at this point that Marner is going to receive an offer sheet. And the problem is the Leafs have $4 million of cap space.
Yep.
They have a combined $22.5 million AAV committed to 2 players.
Yep.
Austin Matthews and John Tavares. I'm skeptical that the Leafs can actually bring Marner back. I'm just hoping that Marner doesn't sign with a division rival. I don't think it's going to be Tampa because, Tampa doesn't have a ton of cap space either. They're trying to deal with Braden Point.
Yep.
My fear is that, for whatever reason, Mitch Marner is going to end up a Boston Bruin.
Oh, my God. That would be the worst for the Maple Leafs fans. I don't think they have the cap space for him, though.
Another punch to the gut. I hope that it doesn't happen. But Marner, I think the Leafs can still be a good hockey team without Mitch Marner. It was important that they addressed their blue line. I like the Tyson Barrie trade. We didn't really need Nazem Kadri. He was a declining player. Obviously, he has the cocaine issues, the off-ice stuff. But he was a real problem, a real headache against the Bruins in the playoffs. And really getting himself suspended. I like his game. I like the grittiness that he adds to the team. But at the same time, his production per dollar is so minimal that I'm totally fine with him being shipped out for a piece that the Leafs actually need, and that's Tyson Barrie.
Yes, and they also got Cody Ceci from Ottawa, too, to bring them some depth on defense. He's somebody that could be on your second or third pairing. He was a underachiever in Ottawa, and I think he'll help you guys too with the new culture around him. And the Barrie move I really like. He's somebody that was good on the Avalanche. He's an offensive defenseman. He'll help you guys. And I think that Marner's gone.
Than Jake Gardner, I'll take it.
He's better than Jake Gardner for sure. And I think Marner's gone. I know a lot of people are calling for the Islanders to offer sheet him because they have cap room. I don't think my Rangers are going to do it. Maybe somebody from the West will do it. You never know. Maybe the Blackhawks, for crying out loud.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it should be interesting. All right, I'm going to have you on again maybe next month to maybe evaluate what trade pieces the Yankees have and the state of baseball and whatnot. Maybe we'll preview some football as well.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, have a good night.